Hi, you're watching Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. One of the things that has become increasingly and very abundantly clear to me in the days since the terrorist attack that happened here in New Zealand, in my hometown of Christchurch, is that there's really nothing that we can offer or we are able to offer the Muslim community to actually deal with this crisis in a deep and profound way that they don't already have. In fact, I would argue they're probably better at than we are right now in the West. One of the things that really made this abundantly clear to me was I saw news coverage in the days after the event of people turning up to various memorials, and they were singing John Lennon's Imagine. And this is a song that effectively what the song is declaring is that really communism is the answer to all the problems in the world. That's really what, at its heart, when you boil it down, is ultimately what's being proposed by this song. And I can't say I blame the people who turn up and sing these songs. They don't have any ill intent. They are simply drawing on the best resources that we've given them, that their society has handed to them at a time like this to try and deal with and process an act of terrorism and mass murder like this. And the best they've got for a lot of people, sadly, is John Lennon's Imagine. But that's a crisis for us in the West, and that points to a really deep and very serious problem that we have in the West. Because what you've got here is people turning up to memorial events outside religious houses of worship where people are memorializing the mass murder, an act of terrorism and cowardly brutal murder of people who were engaged in their religious practices at the time they were killed, and you've got people who are turning up to these memorial events outside their religious houses of worship, and they are singing a song which declares that the world would be better and safer, and life as we know it would be just so much more improved if we didn't have religion. Now surely we can all see why that's a problem. Imagine a situation where someone was ideologically motivated to target atheists, and they targeted a group of atheists at, say, an atheist convention, and they engaged in an act of mass murder and killed a whole lot of them. And then imagine in the days after the event we had vigils around the place, and you had a group of religious believers who turned up to one of those memorial events, and they started singing a song that declared that the world would be better and safer without atheism. You can see the problem here, right? And it's not just that, but as I said, this is a song which is effectively declaring that the answer to all the world's problems really is found in atheistic communism, which is, I mean, that's nonsense. Simply put, that is nonsense. Now, as I said, I don't want to be too hard on the people who do this, and I'm not interested in really focusing on them, because they're just drawing on the best that they've been given. That these are the tools they've got in their toolbox right now, because the West has lost touch with its roots, and so many of the things that we've lost touch with, our Judeo-Christian ethic and heritage, what it gave us was actually, it gave us deep and profound ways, real meaningful ways of dealing with things like this, like times of crisis. Like, for example, in the Jewish tradition, they have a very strong tradition of something that is known as lament. And this idea of lamenting great moments of suffering. And you see this if you read the book of Psalms, you know, the Jewish Psalms, and they're part of the Old Testament and the Christian Bible as well. And you have Psalms, these songs of lament, basically, which start with lines like, my God, why have you abandoned me? So this raw and very visceral acknowledgement of the suffering and the awfulness of this moment. And then they progress, and by the end of the psalm, the psalmist is actually chanting about the fact that they have trust that they will be delivered. You know, God will deliver me from this. And so you start with this moment of acknowledging the suffering, and then it moves through this process. And by the end of it, there's a sort of declaration of hope. And even if you're not a religious believer, you can see how that's actually a really important thing for a person to actually do in processing grave evil. To start by actually acknowledging the gravity of it and the depth of it, and not trying to make superficial declarations about it, and not trying to sort of fob it off and play it down. Oh, don't worry, there's always a brighter tomorrow. Imagine a better world if we all just held hands and sang Kumbaya. They're superficial responses in the face of suffering. But to stand in the face of suffering And to have such an honesty with the situation and with your God as to be able to say, be confident enough to say, God, why have you abandoned me? And then to move through this process where you get to this point where you're then declaring, I have hope that there will be better, that there can be better. You can see how that's actually a really powerful and important thing for society and for the people who might be caught up in these situations. The other thing that we don't do well now in our society, but is really sacred and very important, is actually silence. Silence is actually a very profound act of sacred solidarity. To actually just stand in silence. Just think about this for a second. Let's just pause for just a brief pause of silence and just have a grasp of what's going on here in this moment. Do you see how profound that is? And that's us just pausing in silence. Effectively, everything comes to a halt. And when you stand in silence with a group of people, so you turn up to a vigil and you maintain a silence, you stand outside a house of worship in silence with people who've been the victims of some barbaric act of terrorism and murder, your silence is a sacred thing. You're effectively saying to that person, everything has now stopped and I have given you my total attention. I'm not working. I'm not entertaining myself. I'm not even talking. I, in an act of profound humility, am shutting my mouth and I am giving you everything, including just my total and complete focus. It's a really profound, sacred act of solidarity, and we don't do silence well in the West now. And so I think part of that is this need to try and fill the void. We don't know how to just be in silence in these situations. Interestingly enough, there's actually quite a few religious groups who are doing this well, I think. So for example, here in Christchurch, I know that the Catholic community here has in their cathedral every day, they've been maintaining these prayer vigils and lots of silence in them that start in the morning and go right through to the night. And they're doing this every day. Now, even if you're an atheist who's sitting there going, well, I don't believe there's a God and I don't believe their prayers are being answered, surely even you can see why this is actually a good thing for the community and why this is a good thing for society, because what you've got here is a group of people who are coming together in silence to focus on the victims, to actually contemplate and to turn their thoughts towards these people, to turn their words, their actions, which is what prayer is, it's a form of action. And what they're doing is they are contemplating, their hearts and their minds are now focused on these people and this situation. And surely we can all see, even if you don't believe there's a God out there, that's fine, that's your belief and you're entitled to hold it. But even if you hold that belief, surely you can see how it's really good for society to have a whole group of people coming together and who are focused on the victims and who are thinking about that situation. Because why? It means that they are actually more likely to take action, positive action, to help those people and to do good things in the world as a result of contemplating them and the situation. But basically in the West, by and large, that kind of level of depth is now missing. It's not there anymore. Our sort of collective memories, it's almost like they only go back as far as John Lennon singing Imagine, to sing a song basically that's declaring that atheistic communism is the answer to all the world's problems and suffering. That's sort of all we've got to offer. It's a pop song. And another way, or I guess another troubling aspect I've seen as well, is the way in which that it seems we don't really want to think too deeply about this issue. And I mean in particular, the perpetrator and why he did what he did, what motivated him. Already, there's been so much of this in the wake of this event. Lots of opinion commentary and talking heads and people who basically clearly don't really want to understand what motivated him and what might have caused this. Instead, they are stuck in a very superficial sort of binary way of thinking about this. And so they've only really got three options. Well, okay, option number one, did the guy have a Muslim faith? No, he didn't. So, well, he's not an Islamic terrorist, so we know that option's off the table. Option number two, was he insane? We don't have a clear answer to that just yet. And option number three, so he must be a neo-Nazi then. And it's sort of like that's the only sort of options they're dealing with. Which category is it? But these things, this is not good enough, because basically what you've got is, especially if you read the manifesto, and I've read the manifesto because I want to be better informed and to understand what actually is going on here, what went on here. I think it's important that we do. It's not good enough to say just don't read it. Like, that's going to effectively leave us all in the dark. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to read it, and I'm not going to share the thing with anyone, but I think if we all take that attitude, we're going to be in trouble. we need to understand, because when you look at his manifesto, he's all over the map, and it's actually quite a complicated picture when you look at what this guy is supposedly on about. And there's still even the possibility that this could well have been some ultimate act of nihilistic and gratuitous and obscene violence, some sort of obscene, sick joke motivated by this violent nihilism and loss of meaning. Because it's possible that this manifesto could be nothing more than mockery and ridicule. Almost like, I don't know, a Clockwork Orange brought to life in this brutal, barbaric way. Now, we don't know all the answers yet, and these are big questions, but the point is, it seems that we're not even really interested. We want to quickly box the guy, and we want to say things like, no, this is not us, and we'll get on with this, and it's going to be all good. But I think we've actually got to just say, yeah, this was barbaric, it was brutal, and we don't have all the answers yet, and we do need to actually examine and do some soul-searching. But to do soul-searching, you've got to actually, I think, be living in a culture that's willing to do soul-searching. That's willing, you've got to have a culture that's more than just superficial, that's more than just pop songs, and that really sees the importance of soul searching and actually is doing that on a regular basis, because that's a habit that you form. And religious people have that habit of soul searching, constantly evaluating myself and my own failings and sinfulness and righteousness and all those kind of things. And so what happens is, in these moments, what do religious people do? They fall back on their habit. But if we've got a culture that doesn't do that, that doesn't have that habit, then we don't know how to fall back on it, and we end up with these things that are effectively very superficial. And one of the things that I've really realised, looking at a lot of the coverage of our leaders and other people going to show acts of solidarity, and by the way, these are important things. When we give financial support to people who are in need, when we take meals to them, when we attend vigils and stand outside like their houses of worship to show that, hey, we actually care about you. These are profoundly good things. And by the way, these are the fundamental virtues that underpin the West. Where do they come from? They come from our Judeo-Christian heritage of loving your neighbour, of practicing Christian virtue. These are profoundly important things, and they should keep happening. But there's also some deeper things that, in actual fact, the Muslim community has got and is doing far better than we are in the West at the moment. And it was interesting, it was very clear to me, I was contemplating this the other day, looking at some coverage with our political leaders standing beside some of the Muslim leaders, and I realised, well, what have they got compared to what we've got? Firstly, in the Muslim community here in New Zealand, they have got, and they place a premium on marriage and family. It's actually, it's held up as sacred within that community. They actually have community, intentional community, where people are committed to each other. They're living for each other. And there's genuine investment and self-sacrificial giving within those communities. And lastly, they have faith. And those three things make them far more equipped. The only thing we can give them at that point are effectively financial resources and sort of resource-based things and a show of support. And they are important, but at the end of the day, what will actually get that community through this massacre and will allow them to actually progress forward, to deal with it in a meaningful way, to move forward in a meaningful way, they've already got, and they're already better at than we in the West are. Family, community, faith. And the thing is that we in the West, we're not doing those things well at all. And so the Muslim community actually is far better equipped than we are. And the little we offer them, obviously it's important that we do that, but there's some big questions, I think, that are bigger even than just this event, that are raised by this event. And I am skeptical that we in the West will actually stop and examine and ask ourselves those big questions, like, where are we actually at? Because it's already clear to me, very abundantly clear, that we are desperately trying to cling ourselves back into, or pull ourselves back into that superficial way of looking as if something deep's happening, but it's still very superficial. And it's a natural tendency, I think, because it's safe in that space. We reassure ourselves. We tell ourselves, no, it's just a one-off. We don't want to look too deeply. We want to quickly categorize it, box it, and move on, because it gives us a sense of safety and comfort and control. But realistically, we need to look deeper. We desperately need to look deeper. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. And if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please consider financially supporting the channel. The links for how you can do that are found in the video description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.